So I take a lot of what I learned in psychiatry and apply it in my day-to-day role on the investor side. Money is a scary thing for people to talk about. It's often like the number one concern in marriages, a big stressor for people. And so since I have that psychiatrist way of thinking, I'm able to talk to investors and elicit, what do you really want? What is really on your mind? The spreadsheet is one thing, but what's on your heart?
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further.
Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I'm your host, Yona Weiss. Grateful to be here today with another wonderful guest. We have Elaine Stageberg from Rochester, Minnesota. A little cold out there today, a little frosty, but glad that you can come in and join us today for the podcast and bring some warmth to this episode. So welcome to the show.
Absolutely. We can pretend we're all kind of sitting around a fire together. It's the first cold fall day in Rochester today. It's pleasant, but I know it's a long way until spring too.
It certainly is. And you have, like I said, a lot of people on the show. We have guests from all walks of life. Most common denominator is real estate. And that's what I love about the show, is that there's so many people doing so many different things in the real estate sector. And I know you didn't start out that way. You have a background in the medical profession, but have more recently gotten into real estate, have grown a significant portfolio of multifamily properties in Minnesota. And we'd just love to hear from you. Who are you? What's your background? How did you get started in real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, my name's Elaine Stageberg. I live in Rochester. I've been married to my husband, Nick, for 12 years. We just celebrated our 12th anniversary about 10 days ago. We have 4 beautiful children. We have a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 8-year-old. We like a lot of chaos. We like a lot of chaos at home. We like a lot of chaos in our business. We just like that feeling of, there's a really beautiful quote, like, when I stand before God at the end of my life, I want to be able to say I used it all. That's how we want to feel every single day. As you mentioned, before being in real estate full time, I trained as a physician. So I'm a psychiatrist. I trained at the Mayo Clinic. That's how we ended up living here in Rochester, Minnesota. And my husband had a career in tech. I'm sure we'll talk about why we first started investing in real estate, but we started investing right when we first got married and built our own portfolio over the years. Then we started working with debt partners, and we started doing JVs. Then we launched our private equity fund. And so Nick left his career in tech in 2019. I left my career in medicine in 2020. Lots of stuff we could talk about there, about leaving a very stable profession, high paycheck, to go into the world of investing full time. And now we run our company, Black Swan Real Estate, full time. So we're together all day running the company, and then home at night taking care of those 4 beautiful kids.
Wow, that's an incredible story. It's amazing how you guys started off investing early on, but then moving full time into this just a few years ago, and the ability to grow, I think, fully integrated. I know you guys have a property management company as well, and that really helps, especially if you're growing such a large portfolio, to take that in-house. But managing that, I have 6 kids as well, so I definitely know what it's like, and a lot close in age as well. So there's not such a huge age gap there. I definitely understand what it's like. Thank God my youngest now is 8, which means we're over the kind of the young time when
everyone's potty trained.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not dealing with babies anymore at this point, but I definitely remember it was not too long ago that we had 4 kids under 10, and it was definitely a challenge. But what was it really, that catalyst that drove you and Nick to say, oh, let's take a step back from our tech career, from our physician, from our psychiatric career, whatever it was that you were doing, and say, let's focus more full time? Because a lot of people, you start off your lives, you're really passionate a lot of times about what you're doing. So you go to school for many years, especially earning degrees and et cetera. It's got to take some real catalyst to make a huge life-changing shift like that. What was it for you guys that did that? Especially dealing with very high, I assume, relatively high-paying jobs, right?
Yeah. So starting from, let's start at the beginning real quick, and then I'll blast up through our trajectory to answer that question. So Nick and I both came from childhoods where our parents struggled a lot with money. Nick's mom had physical disabilities that really prevented her from working. His father was never in the picture. They struggled even more than my family. They struggled with homelessness and just extreme financial insecurity. And then on my side, unfortunately, my father was addicted to opioids. So all of the kind of roller coaster that comes with that. And there would be years when money was plentiful and then years where it was not. And that really bonded Nick and I together when we very first met. We both knew independently of each other that we wanted stability in our adult lives and we wanted stability for our children. So when we first met, we knew that we wanted that, but we didn't know how to make that happen. We both knew that we were on these trains to high-paying professions, and we thought, if we just stay on the train, then we'll get to a place where we have high incomes and that will take care of everything. But we also knew that we wanted freedom. And I think we just knew that because there were blogs and podcasts and things at that time. That's right when the FIRE movement was first getting some traction. And so we couldn't go to our parents to ask that. So we went to people who were a generation ahead of us, like our friends' parents or people at work or just people that we felt had some success that were a generation or a generation and a half ahead of us, and asked them, what are you doing in your life? We asked them all sorts of things. What are you doing to make your marriage successful? How are you raising your children? What are you doing financially? And we heard over and over again, real estate. And there was this clear pattern that people were earning money in their professions and then shoveling it into real estate. And it was the real estate that really gave them freedom. So we were very lucky that when we got married, we both owned our own homes. Going back to that, we both loved stability. So of course we owned our own homes. We kept my home as a rental, moved into his home. That was our first accidental investment. Liked that. We self-managed right from the beginning. And then we bought our first purposeful investment about 3 years later after we saved up some money. And it was during this time that I was leaving my career to go into medical school. So we were like cutting our income in half, but still very excited about investing. And then as we reached financial freedom pretty quickly, I would say within maybe 7 or 8 years of building our portfolio. And then, so to specifically address your question about deciding to leave the career.
That's a big transition, right? I see the FIRE, financial independence, retire early, that stuff. And that's huge. But then it's okay, you've reached that, you have your goals, but now like finding another job, really what you've done is finding another job for yourself.
Yep. So in probably 2017, 2018 was when we started talking about Nick leaving his career. And it took us a while to warm up to that idea. It took a lot of looking through our personal budget, making big decisions around health insurance, those sorts of things. And we had this built-in buffer when Nick left his career that because I was a physician, I was able to take a very part-time job at a local hospital, working every other weekend for just that Saturday and Sunday. And by doing that 26 times in 1 year, I would earn Nick's entire tech salary. So it was a big commitment on my part to say, you can leave tech, and then I basically have a plan to earn my own income plus all of your income. And that way, whatever happens in this next year, we still have the same amount of income in that year. Turns out he earned his entire year's salary within the first few weeks of being self-employed through real estate commissions. He had his real estate license and just, I think like many entrepreneurs, had a fire lit under him when his time was, completely his own. So then we were really smooth sailing because I was able to go back to the hospital and give away some of my weekends. So that year wasn't so tough. And then we just had a lot of like mental freedom of, hey, we've already earned our whole salary for the year. So what does Nick really want to do to grow the business as much as possible with very few constraints? And then when I left medicine in 2020, there was definitely some pull that Nick had complete time freedom. He could decide when he was working, what he was working on, when he was traveling, all of those things. So of course I wanted to be part of that lifestyle. And medicine is the exact opposite of that. You have a deep patient schedule. You're committed to seeing those people at that time. You don't just wake up and decide, I'm going to do something different today. And it was really because of COVID that I left medicine. And so the lesson there for myself and for others is it's often from great pain that great things come. So in 2020, we had just had our third child. It seemed every day we were getting a call from one of their childcare providers saying, one of your children has had a COVID exposure. They can't come back for 10 days. Minnesota was fairly strict. So our second and third child, their 10-day quarantine started on day 10 of child 1. So it was just crazy. And there was just so much pain that Nick was trying to run the business. I was trying to see my patients. We're trying to take care of these kids. And I just looked around and I said, I have a business and I have a real estate portfolio that can provide for me. I'll just step back from medicine, check back in a couple of years after there's a vaccine and things stabilize. And in retrospect, I'm so grateful that we had that pain because I think I probably would have stayed in medicine for many more years. But I had that pain that forced me to reevaluate. And because we had spent all of those years building our real estate portfolio, we had the income that we needed to be able to say, hey, we'll both just step back from traditional employment, run our company, take care of our rental properties, be there for our children through COVID, and try to enjoy ourselves as much as possible.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. And I think a lot of people, COVID really just it changed our lives and changed our worlds around in many ways. Or for a lot of people, it gave them pause to think about, okay, what can I do differently in my career? And how can I choose how I want to spend my time? If you have that option, and I think you had that option, like you said, you had the income, you were able to choose. And I think spending years working up to that was the biggest, I think, I don't know, not catalyst really, but gave you the freedom to make that
Mhm.
choice at the right time.
Mhm.
COVID was
Yep.
just the impetus that made it possible.
I think like many people who are striving for financial freedom, it seems so far away. It seems like, gosh, this might take me 10 years, 20 years. But if you really stick with it and you really put all of your resources and energy toward it, you can get there very quickly. I've seen in our own lives and the lives of many people around us, really committed effort can get you there in about 5 years or so. Let's say 8, because right now the market is tough. And so we didn't have a clear vision when we started that we would get to financial freedom so quickly, or that we would then move into real estate investing full time, or all of those sorts of things. We just knew that if we built something, other good things would come of it. And that we just had to stay really focused for a short number of years to build. We always visualized it as building the tracks, getting the train on
Yeah.
the tracks. And then now we just have to keep the train on the tracks.
That's a really good analogy. And I think building it and spending the time to building it and getting it set up, that's really like a lot of stuff just comes naturally after that, right? You figure out what to do and growing your portfolio slowly. Then once things are in place, you can grow it much faster, which is really what you guys are doing right now. So let's like that transition and talk about what your day to day is like running a full time real estate. It's an empire, really. I mean, you're talking about like 1,000 units, a huge portfolio. You have a property management company. It's not a small thing, right? I know you
Mhm.
guys also manage other people's properties, not just your own. So there's a lot that comes with that. It's growing a huge business and running that. I'm curious to know, what is your role in that, becoming from a psychiatrist to running a property management company and real estate
Mhm.
investment company is very different. It really takes
Mhm.
many different skills, but I'm curious to know if there are like specific skills that you found in yourself that actually help you, or that you learned in your previous career that help you to run your current business.
So in the company, we really think of the company as two separate companies. There's Black Swan Real Estate, which works with our investors, does our strategic planning, acquires the assets, and then Black Swan Living, which is our property management company. All the way back from the beginning, that very first property we self-managed. And again, so grateful for that, right? There's so many things that at the time feel painful, but they turn out to be really good lessons. So we self-managed that first property because we couldn't afford a property manager. We needed every single penny we could to get cash flow. And so we thought we'll self-manage it for a few years and then maybe hire a third-party property manager. Turns out we really loved management and we really love operations. Nick and I had many startups before doing real estate together. We had a tech startup, we had a car dealership. So we love thinking about operations and how to create value and put systems and processes into place. So we created our own property management company. And today in our day-to-day roles, of course, there's quite a bit of overlap. But in general, I run Black Swan Real Estate. I do our marketing, our communication. I work with our investors. I set the strategic plan. I think about acquisitions and timing. And then Nick does all of our operations at the property management company. And that's a really nice balance between the two of us. It gives us some checks and balances. It gives us some division of labor, some, expertise that we can really hone in those areas. And then speaking of psychiatry, I have found that so much of what I learned as a psychiatrist and who I became as a psychiatrist, right? Just my way of thinking really applies to investors, really applies to leading a large team,
For
and
sure.
really applies to thinking about people's living experiences,
Hmm.
right? The thing I tell our investors and our property managers is second to your human health, where you live is probably the most important decision in your life. It determines what communities you're in, what resources you have, who is around you, how you feel when you come home. Do you feel stressed out and you don't want to be there? Do you feel relaxed and you can let your hair down? And we get to create that. And we get to, lead our property management team from that ethos. As far as I know, we're the only psychiatrist-led property management team in the country. And I have some ideas over the next 10 or 20 years to do some studies around that about public health and community health and housing. So I take a lot of what I learned in psychiatry and apply it in my day-to-day role. On the investor side, money is a scary thing for people to talk about. It's often the number one concern in marriages, a big stressor for people. And so since I have that psychiatrist way of thinking, I'm able to talk to investors and elicit, what do you really want? What is really on your mind? The spreadsheet is one thing, but what's on your heart? And so even though I don't, prescribe medicine and these people aren't my patients, I think like a psychiatrist all day in the interactions that I have. And I found that's been really helpful. And it makes it that I miss medicine a little bit less, because really the only thing I'm not doing is prescribing, but I'm still talking to people in the same way that I did as a psychiatrist.
It makes so much sense. And I think you're absolutely right. Not to call your investors patients in any way whatsoever. Right.
But we're all human.
Exactly. No, but the way that you communicate and the way that you understand people, which is really the foundation of investor relations, is understanding people and seeing what are their goals, what do they want to do. And I think you've had, not just through your psychiatric career, but also through your investment journey and that financial independence, you've been able to do that for yourself and for your family. So being able to help others reach those same or similar goals is also true. Have you had any investors because I know I'm myself also a very active, or not active, passive investor, but very active in that role, meaning I've invested in many syndications as a passive investor. But my goal is not to become like a full-time property manager or full-time real estate investor. It's just not one of my goals. I love what I do, my personal day-to-day. But I'm curious to know, have you had any of your investors or people that you've, even on your team, I know you have a great team of property managers, et cetera, that, have they expressed interest in becoming more actively involved in owning their own real estate or investing?
That's a really beautiful question. So on the property management side, lots of things we could dive into. One of them is that from our GP share of the profits, 5% of that goes to charity and 5% of that goes to profit share for our team members. We want our team members to know in their hearts when they walk into a single family home or an apartment building, I own a piece of this. And to go that extra mile, to pick up a piece of trash off the ground, to do that lease showing when it's technically after their hours, to have some sense of, I'm building this for the investors, and I'm also building it for the residents, and I'm also building it for myself. And so we wanted that extreme ownership. And so we create that through our profit share. Another thing that we do is we're a very active real estate sales team. And we really believe that everyone on our team, if they want to own real estate, should. And that looks a little bit different based on the life stage that any particular team member is in. For some of our younger folks, it's helping them get their first home, teaching them about house hacking, getting them set up with roommates. For some of our older folks, it might be turning their starter home into a rental home and then helping them buy another home. But showing to them, hey, if you're helping create this investment thing for people all day, every day, you should create it for yourself too. And it's the same fundamentals. And how do we help you get to own real estate? And we love celebrating when a team member closes on a personal home or rental property. So that's a big part of our ethos here. And then on the investor side, I found that our investors are, I would say probably 30 or 40% of them have some active portfolio. A lot of them do short-term rentals. A lot of them invest in their local area. And then they invest with us with their additional capital, or oftentimes they'll invest with us for depreciation. So they're claiming real estate professional status and then can get additional depreciation through investing with us, and that boosts their tax advantages. And that's been really neat that we've been able to call upon our investors of, hey, what are you seeing in the market? What's happening? What are you learning? What expertise do you have? A very concrete example of that is we historically have done all long-term rentals. And we're in Rochester, Minnesota, home of the Mayo Clinic, and Mayo is doing a $4 billion hospital expansion. So there's a huge need right now for short-term and mid-term rentals as the volume goes up and as construction workers come to live in Rochester for a short period of time where they're building a hospital. So we're converting a portion of our portfolio to short-term rentals, and I'm able to call our investors that we have great relationships with. And it's exciting because even though they're a passive investor, they feel like they're a part of the fund. They feel like the advice that they are giving me has material impact on them. They're financially motivated to give me, good advice because I'm investing their money. And that's just been so neat to see that we're going a step away from what we've traditionally done. And yet I can go to my investors and say, help me set up owner res, or help me, what is your, favorite shopping list, or those sorts of things. And it strengthens the relationship between me and our investors. Because
Yeah.
again, even though they're passive, they get to see the action firsthand. And that's been a really neat thing that's been going on over the last couple of weeks.
That's so awesome to hear on so many levels. The fact that you provide, what you mentioned earlier briefly, you're providing a portion of the equity to your employees as well. That's huge. That's just revenue share. It goes such a long way because they're very incentivized, obviously, but they feel part of it. They feel not just their employees, they feel they're really part of it and growing. And they'll see as, especially as you exit more properties, et cetera, as that comes down, they'll see, wow, okay, I just made a big chunk of money on this for an extra bonus, which really adds up over time. But I want to focus on what you talked about, the kind of transition. And I think it's really important right now, especially. I know a lot of people are thinking about what can I do to pivot in these times, especially when acquisitions are getting a little bit harder and more difficult, especially with risen interest rates over the past year or so. It's been very difficult to find the same types of deals we did over the past few years. But the fact that you invest locally, number one, is huge because you're able to know exactly what's going on in your community, what the needs in your community are. And the fact that you have a kind of unique area, not entirely unique, but that it has the opportunity to build more short-term or mid-term rentals for not only, like you said, the construction workers, nurses, patients needing places to stay. That's such an awesome way to do that. If you're able to turn like full, it's like basically like a hotel. I don't know if you've had any zoning issues or anything like that needs to be done. I'm curious if that's something that's come up, because that can potentially be an issue if you're converting a multifamily building into essentially like a hotel, if it's short-term or mid-term. But that's a great way to do it. I know we had Daniel Farber on the show a while back, and he started a company called Layers, which essentially turns multifamily properties into furnished mid-term rentals. And you can literally charge like twice or three times the rent as well, which is it's incredible for increasing revenue on a property.
Yeah, lots to unpack there.
Yeah.
Kind of the easiest one to hit off the bat is in our area, every long-term and short-term rental has to have a rental license. It's like a basic safety check for egress windows, handrails, smoke detectors, those sorts of things. So all of our properties have that long-term rental license. And then a short-term rental license is the same check. And then you check the box on the form that you want to do short-term rental as well. In our area, you can do a single-family home as a short-term rental. And then all multifamily, you can do up to 20% as short-term rentals without needing any additional licenses or inspections or taxes or those sorts of things. And we don't even plan to go that far. So we have 1,000 units here in Rochester. A third of our portfolio is in Tacoma, Washington. So we have another 300 there. And at this point, we're thinking we'll spin up our portfolio to about 100 short-term rentals here in Rochester, and then really get a sense of, is this working? Do we enjoy it? Is it creating additional profit for the buildings? And then we could go up to 20% of our portfolio. So that's the easy one to address. Earlier in the question, you asked about interest rates. And the thing that I would say for us is our strategy has always been the same. We have always had a BRRRR business model all the way back to that very first home, not the home that was mine that I lived in before we got married, but that first intentional rental property. We paid cash for it. We did most of the renovation ourselves, put lots of the renovations on credit cards, did a cash out refi. And I'll never forget that moment that we sat in the car. And this is back when we had a paper check and we had the house. It was cash flowing. A really lovely family was living there. We knew that it was in very good physical condition because we had just gotten done renovating it. We had all of the money back, plus all of the money we needed to pay off the credit cards, plus more. And I just remember us sitting there and saying, we will do whatever it takes to have this moment over and over and over again for the rest of our real estate journey. We've never sold a single asset. We've always done a BRRRR business model. Even as we moved into private equity, we didn't go the traditional route of having prefs and waterfalls and catch-up prefs and an exit at year 3 or 5 or 7. We've kept that BRRRR business model with an indefinite hold inside of our private equity funds to get to an infinite rate of return, keep our investors in the deal, and then just benefit from that infinite rate of return. And very significant tax advantages too, because there's no depreciation recapture for a long time. But the tactics are always changing. So some of the things that we've done over the last, say, 18 months is instead of doing a traditional cash out refi, we've gone to the banks and put a second mortgage on those properties. All of our debt is with local regional banks that we have good personal relationships with. All of our debt is fixed rate debt. We know we don't want to give up that 2.75 or 3% interest rate that we got in, say, 2018, 2019, but we want to harvest the equity out now that our renovations are done. So that's what we've been able to do there. So that's an example of like the tactics need to change. I didn't know in 2015 that in the future, I would need to use a second mortgage to do my cash out. But I knew in 2015 that my strategy in the future would continue to be the BRRRR method, harvesting the equity out and holding those assets. So the tactics change. And right now we're exploring this short-term rental thing to say, hey, while we're not acquiring because deal flow is so slow, we would acquire if we could. We're still underwriting. We're still making offers. We're not out of the game, but deal flow is slow. So we don't have anything under contract. What can we do to optimize the profitability of the portfolio we already have? So the strategy has always stayed the same. The tactics are always changing.
And being flexible, I think, is the key, because when you have a business that's full-time, you have the experience of doing this year after year, you have to change tactics from time to time. The strategy, like you said, going to stay the same, but keep it going and keep it going strong. I love that. Do you have any?
Think about like
go ahead.
coffee, like Starbucks, like coffee is as old as time.
Mhm.
Cold foam didn't exist 5 years ago. And now it's all the rage in coffee drinks, like even coffee, even something that is thousands and thousands of years old. Entrepreneurs in the coffee space need to be thinking about their tactics and how can they optimize and maximize. The same thing in real estate.
Yeah, 100%. There's really no end to how you can increase profits and do things, but being creative is really what it's all about in real estate and in any business. You have to go and see where it takes you, what's needed at the right time. And I love to hear how you've been able to grow your business and develop it and continue to find new ways to profit and to bring great returns to your investors at the same time. Elaine, I want to transition now to what we call the final four. So these are 4 questions
Awesome.
that we ask all our guests. First one to you is going to be, what's the worst job that you ever had?
I'd have to say it was probably, if we take out babysitting, because many young women do babysitting, but my first actual job where I was employed, I was a waitress. And I really struggled with that. I have a hard time recognizing faces, and I also have a very hard time with spatial relations. And someone at a table in kind of the back left would ask for ketchup, and I'd go get it, and I'd walk out, and I would just look at a sea of tables and know that someone needed ketchup, but have no idea who. And I struggled with that for weeks. I thought, oh, well, I'll get better at it. I'll like learn my way around the restaurant or learn how to recognize faces better, those sorts of things. And I'm just not good at it. And I left that job pretty quickly and I went on to other jobs. This was in like early high school. Some things we're good at and some things we're not. And that was a very stressful like month or so at that job that I just didn't enjoy. And I'm glad that I left pretty quickly and didn't keep trying to torture myself with it and just recognize, hey, I'm not very good at this. Let's try something that I am very good at.
Yeah. And I think we learn through all of our experiences what your skills are, what you're not good at, et cetera, and learn to pivot. But yeah, anything like that is going to be an eye opener for sure.
Yeah. Meanwhile, my husband, all through high school, he supported himself with having waiting jobs, and he would have all these tricks where he would like juggle the ketchup bottles. I didn't know that at the time, but he told me we met, and I'm like, oh, my stint with being a waiter was very challenging. I couldn't juggle the ketchup bottles. I was just trying to figure out who needed what.
Yeah, and no, it's hard. And being on your feet for so long is also so difficult. That's not something that's easy to do.
Yeah.
Elaine, second question for you is going to be, what's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
That would definitely be The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. Basically, the idea is there's finite games that we play. Take like a game of basketball. 2 teams get on the floor. They play the game. There's a set of rules. There's a timer. At the end, whoever has the most points wins. You move on from that game. An infinite game is that the point of the game is to keep playing the game. Point of the game is to be in a relationship, to get better at the craft, to bring more people into the game. It's such a different way of thinking about things and really thinking about business and thinking about working with investors and working with our teammates and working on ourselves, that our own personal game in real estate is to have financial freedom, but it wasn't to get financial freedom and then to stop. It was to get financial freedom and then keep the game going for the benefit of ourselves and for others. I cannot recommend the book Infinite Game by Simon Sinek enough. When you say paradigm shifting,
Yeah.
that is absolutely Infinite Game. Like, it's more than just, oh, this was a good book, I got some stuff out of it. It's, wow, the person I was before I read this book and after I read this book are two entirely different people.
That's amazing. I've never heard of that actually. So I'm excited to add that to my reading list, The Infinite Game. And we will
Amazing.
definitely put it on there, check it out, and eager to learn
He's
because
the author of like Leaders Eat Last,
yeah, I've
Start
read
with
that
Why. Yeah.
and I'm definitely a fan of him, but haven't come across that one yet. So definitely checking that.
Yeah. Let me know what you think of it.
All right. And third question is, what's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
So, starting about a year ago, I started weightlifting. I work with a trainer 5 days a week. I had tried all sorts of things before that, cardio, classes, all sorts of things. And I just didn't like any of it. Going back to that first story around waitressing, like, I just wasn't good at it. And I just beating my head against the wall of, I want to be physically fit. And yet, gosh, you put me on a treadmill and I'm literally just watching the seconds tick down and feeling tortured. Class, not so much. But weightlifting, I really enjoy it. And I feel like it really, like, my body is naturally suited for it. It's fun. I like how the metrics, you track everything and you see the progress. So certainly a goal I have over the next several years is to get better and better at that. Another thing that I love about it is that it's a long-term thing. Like, I know that 5 years from now, if I stick with it, I'll be a much better weightlifter than I am today. I won't be a much better weightlifter tomorrow. I just need to keep going and keep showing up and keep putting in the work. There's no like rush to perfection. It's just doing it, getting stronger, getting better at my form. So that's a new hobby I've picked up over the last year that's really been a lot of fun and has given me a big outlet for my physical health, getting out aggression and thoughts. And I meet with the same trainer every day. So he's my sounding board where I'm telling him like, this is what happened today. What do you think? And since he's outside of real estate, outside of my life, he's like the perfect little counselor for me. It's all been really good.
Wow, that's amazing. Training is definitely hard, especially if we're doing it 5 days a week, and that's pretty awesome. But weightlifting is not something I would imagine is something that is going to be that inspiring. I know my wife actually, I got her involved in this a few months back, meeting with a trainer only twice a week, and for her, it's like really difficult. I can't imagine doing it 5 times a week. Good for you. I think that's
I
something.
built up to that. I didn't start 5 right from the get-go. I think I
Gotcha.
started with 2 or 3 and then added the 4th and then added the 5th. And so now it's Monday through Friday. But it gets addicting.
Yeah, awesome. Finally, we like to ask, what does success mean to you?
When I think of the word success, I think of how Tony Robbins defines success. So he says there's the science of success. We can look at people and there's clear patterns of what it takes to do well in life, what it takes to do well in business, how to create profitability, all of those things. And then there's also the art of fulfillment. And they're very different, right? The science of success is more more Western philosophy. The art of fulfillment is more Eastern philosophy. Obviously, there's a broad brush there, but that's how you can think of those. And it's really the two together that really creates a good life. We all know lots of people, whether they're celebrities or business folks or whatever, that kind of seemingly have it all, but they're miserable. Conversely, we know people that have nothing, that if you objectively look at them, it looks like they have nothing, and yet they're very happy. And it's really the combination, the science of success and the art of fulfillment. I learned that from Tony many years ago. And I try to think through that paradigm a couple of times a month. What am I doing with my time? What are the goals that I'm working toward? Am I hitting both of these? There's no sense being very successful if I'm not happy. And there's, in my opinion, I think because I'm young and I like to work, like there's no sense just sitting around like lazy and happy if I'm not also productive. Again, that's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
But that's how I think of success, is the science of success and the art of fulfillment.
Good for you. Love that. And I love the way that you've framed it. And that's something that I think we have to focus on. Everyone has to find what it means to them. And if you can put it into specific words, I think that makes it even more powerful, because what your goals are, what you're aiming to. So I appreciate that. Elaine, it's really been a pleasure. I'm so glad you joined me today. Where can our listeners find you or reach out to you if they want to?
Our website is meetblackswan.com, meetblackswan.com. Talks all about our history, the business, our portfolio, what our investments are like. We do a once monthly live Zoom call called our Community Power Hour, where we teach on a particular topic and then do Q&A. My calendar's on there if anyone wants to block a time with me. All of that's at meetblackswan.com.
Okay. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Thank you so much again for joining me.
My pleasure.
Really been a
Thank you
true
for having
pleasure.
me.
Yeah. And to our listeners, you guys, you are awesome. If you listen to this all the way to the end, once again, I appreciate you for tuning in. And remember, until next time, the best advice comes only when you ask.
Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.